Welcome back to Open Line, talking about medical malpractice with medical malpractice attorney Clint Kelly. If you have a situation you're questioning, give us a call. Number at the bottom of the screen there. You were talking about, before we went to break, calling it a second opinion. How many people don't do it. Do you think people are just intimidated by the whole medical system?
I do. I think the majority of patients, unfortunately, are intimidated by the system. And you know, to some extent, the system is set up that way. Ben, you can't get to a doctor unless you go through certain hoops to get to them. And I mean, actually talk to them or see them face to face. I don't know what your experience is going to a hospital. When I go to a hospital, I feel like I'm just cattle being herded in and put on an assembly line. Some of us call it assembly line medicine. The bills are ginormous, you know, and the whole thing is, as you say, it's just overwhelming. And so I think people, unfortunately, because of that intimidation factor, accept substandard care and won't do anything about it because of the intimidation factor. Now, if you've been burned by the system, that's different. Sometimes you'll come out of that and then you won't put up with that kind of bad care again. But I think some people haven't called me or called other malpractice attorneys when they've been badly injured or perhaps they've lost a loved one, simply because the healthcare system has intimidated them enough where they just don't feel comfortable to come out and do something about it. Some people think, look, if I sue my doctor or a hospital, I may not be able to get medical care again, which is completely false.
Well, they might think
but
that
some really think
a word would get out and Dr. A may not accept them, and other doctors may not accept them.
Right,
Is
and
that's
that's a pervasive view, particularly in the suburban and outside the suburban and the rural areas, where people just think, I may not be able to get care.
And this what you're describing, this assembly line medicine, is it? So we've seen a lot about healthcare in the news. Right. We've had the Affordable Care Act. It looks like the Affordable Care Act may be repealed now, but all this stuff, trying to make healthcare better, giving more people access. Lots of people don't have insurance. What was it like 20 years ago? Was it better, or did we just not know as much? Did doctors have more time because fewer people had access, or did we have more people in the medical profession? I mean, what are things getting worse?
I think doctors made more money. Well, I know doctors made more money years ago, and they could spend more time with patients. My health care insurance, when I started practicing law, was fairly reasonable. This was almost 25 years ago. It was a reasonable amount of money. People were just starting to gripe about it going up, but at the time I didn't really notice it much. Look how much health insurance has gone up over the last 25 years, particularly over the last 10 years. And there's like no end in sight. And so, in my view, what's happened is there's been such pressure on cost containment, and health maintenance organizations, there's only a few of them now left, have put so much pressure, downward pressure on doctors and hospitals and nurses to contain costs, and then the hospitals have to maintain a profit that's suitable for their needs, and again, that puts pressure on the doctors and the nurses, and their only alternative to raise revenue for the hospital and to keep their income up is to increase the patient volume. But again, there's only so many minutes in the day, and I don't see more doctors being graduated. When's the last time you saw a hospital being built in Nashville?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Now, we have a lot here, but yeah, they're not building new ones.
Think of the thousands of people that are coming into this city.
Right.
I mean, I think Uber put out a statement that 1,000 people are coming to Nashville per month. Mm-hmm. And that's just in Nashville. That's not the people in the ring around Nashville. This city is growing leaps and bounds. The area around it's growing leaps and bounds, and there's only so much health care supply out there to be provided. And so it's the law of supply and demand. As the demand increases and the supply stays steady, you're going to have, in my opinion, a safety margin that's going to continue to get leaner and leaner.
Interesting. All right, we talked a little bit about this. Nick did a story on it. Woman sues alleging botched breast surgery.
Right.
So, all right, what about this situation?
Yeah, that was is a 49-year-old woman who had breast augmentation probably about 10 years before. And she came to this physician to get, in essence, a new set of implants put in. And that went successfully. But when they put implants in, Ben, they put them in under the breast, and it leaves like a smile that kind of scar up under the breast. If you play golf and you hit a golf ball, sometimes you'll see a smile on the golf ball. Well, that's what it looks like under the breast. Sometimes those scars are left there. Sometimes they are what's called revised or eliminated. She wanted those scars revised. The surgeon agreed to revise those scars, and that was the scope of the agreement, that she would go in and have that surgery just to repair those scars. Well, she wakes up from surgery and in pain, and she goes home, and the first time she takes the bandage off, she looks down her breast, and her nipple and the areola, which is the area, the donut around the nipple, is turning black. And there's scars all across the sides, and like what they call an inverted T, where you've got an upside down T scar formation all around her nipple and under her breast. And so she's like, wait a minute, I didn't know what this was. I didn't sign up for this. Long story short, she's lost her nipple and deformed. And that case is another medical battery case where she says, I did not authorize this. And when you look at the consent form does not call for a breast reconstruction or a breast lift. It's simply a scar revision. So the consent form, the description of the procedure that the doctor has in his own notes, all of that verifies what she's saying was the authority that she gave. And he exceeded that authority. And the only explanation I can come up with that makes sense to me, or at least what my expert thinks, is this doctor got her mixed up with somebody else.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's my question. Why did that happen?
Mixed up with somebody else. I mean, it's just that's what I'm telling you is 20 years ago when I started this work, you might have one medical battery case every 5 years. It was that rare. And now, I mean, I've been getting them. I've probably had 10 in the last 3 years. Like I said, the elbow surgery, that was another case I had 3 years ago. A lady operated on the wrong elbow. Never had that when I was starting out. Now, it can't be mere coincidence that they're all coming to me. Mm-hmm. So when I read about cases across the nation, I see some of these things happen in other states. The only conclusion I can come to is that this is what the system is producing right now.
And that's why it's important to kind of know your rights.
Correct.
And go forward. What's I guess time is probably the biggest mistake people make. What's another mistake people make when they may have a case but then they don't move forward?
Thinking they're going to get better when they're not. They're being told, look, you're going to improve over time, give it some time, and they let too much time go. I think that's another big mistake. I think another very big mistake is they have the mindset, I got to pay something. They don't have to pay anything.
Right.
There's no money that's paid. The only compensation I get and payment of costs is if I get a recovery for the patient, for the client. So it's totally free up until the time there's any money recovered. So I think that's a major mistake. And then the intimidation factor, finding a way, maybe it's because you look down the road and you realize I'm going to have a tough road ahead of me, either because someone close to me died or I've got a bad injury, I'm in a wheelchair, and having the guts to say, I'm going to call a lawyer and I'm going to do something about this. I'm not going to take this line down.
And at the same time, I think people have to realize, because you've been on enough for me to know, that you can only take the most severe cases.
Right.
You're not going to. We had somebody call, and it's a terrible situation, I'm sure. She has allergies, she wants them treated, but that's not going to rise to the level of what we're talking about here is somebody who died or is seriously, massively injured.
And the primary reason for that, Ben, is simple economics. These cases can cost up to $100,000 to get to trial. And if a jury's only going to give a patient $50,000, you can't afford to take it. It's upside down. Remember I told you about conservative juries, they're just not giving awards to people who have temporary damages or damages that are relatively minor. I think what evens the playing field in these cases, when I told you there's a preference for the doctor in hospitals, you got a patient that's wheeled in to the courtroom, or a patient who's got a crutch and comes in missing a leg, or a patient who's horribly burned. The injury speaks for itself. It's its own witness. It's there testifying throughout the entire trial without even saying a word. The jury continues to look at this and say this person is going to have a long road ahead of them. That evens the playing field. But if it's something minor or temporary, I think juries just look past that and say, hey, get over it.
Right. Is there a cap on what a jury can give out? Have they put a cap on that? And
Yes.
what is it?
There is. There is a $750,000 non-economic damages cap, which means pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life, disfigurement, meaning if you're horribly burned, all that's wrapped up into a category called non-economic damages, and the most you can recover is $750,000 in most cases. You can up it to $1 million, but that's if you are in a wheelchair, you're a double amputee, you've been burned over 40% of your body, or you are the parent of a minor child and it's a death case. Otherwise, it's $750,000 and that's it.
And on those other things, is it $1 million?
$1 million's it.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, you think about if someone's negligence puts you in a wheelchair and you're, say, you know, even my age or your age, and knowing the consequences of that and all that goes with being in a wheelchair, the things you not only give up, but the things you have to do going forward, your own bowel program, your own bladder program, not being able to go walk with your kids or your grandkids, all of those things. And for someone to have the temerity to say $1 million is it, I mean, would you take $1 million for that?
No way.
I mean, you probably wouldn't take $10 million for that. That's the problem with putting caps. Tennessee juries sentence people to death every day. We can trust them to set them an amount of damages that's reasonable without the legislature telling them what to do.
When did that go into place? That's fairly recent.
Yeah,
isn't it?
2011.
So the last few years that's
Right.
happened.
Right.
And then is there punitive? Is there something that can be done there that's beyond the $1 million?
Yeah, and that's a rare case. That case we were talking about with the hospital and the doctor who came in drunk, punitive damages are reserved for the worst of the worst. And in the medical malpractice field, I mean, it's like a handful that occur each year across the country, just a handful, because it's juries almost never award these. But a case like that with a drunk doctor and nurses who are enablers, that's a situation where a jury could get punitive damages to punish the hospital and get them to change the culture.
What do you see about when you look around the hospitals? I guess you can't get too specific, but you look around Middle Tennessee. Some hospitals are better than others, I'm sure you would find.
No question.
How would a person go about looking into that?
There are no requirements for a hospital to report their complication rates, individual mortality rates, things that you can find out about a doctor, like whether that doctor's ever settled a malpractice case or paid a judgment. You're not entitled to that information from a hospital. So all you really have with regard to doing background on a hospital is word of mouth. Asking people, friends, co-workers, family members who went to that hospital, what'd you think? Do they treat you right? It's vital to ask around. And the interesting thing is you can go to a good hospital and still get bad medical care. You can go to what I would deem a bad hospital and get great medical care. There's almost no rhyme or reason to it. Statistically, there are about 3 hospitals in this area that I like and I would go to just because of what I know about them. But it's not what I would call a consumer-friendly system or data system for letting prospective patients know much about the hospitals that they go to. And again, you're putting your life in these people's hands.
I asked you one time, do you think it's good that, because I was concerned at the short stays now that, you know, the overnight procedures or whatever you call it, the day of procedures, you know, everything's done so quickly now. Right. And you said that's good.
I do.
Because so many, yeah, you get out of
there. I mean, that's hospitals are teeming with bacteria. That's why infection rates are what they are. It's a hazard of going to a hospital, and so the longer you're in that hospital, the more likely there's going to be some type of complication down the road. Some are minor, don't matter. Some can mean life or death. So yeah, the faster you get out of that hospital, in my judgment, the better off you're going to be.
And go home and recover.
Yes, yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. You want to call, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. An opportunity to call in with a situation you may have a question about. Take a break. Be back right after this.